In this video, we're going to show how to implement the Hello World challenge using Git and GitHub at the command line. Our first step is to create our Xcode project. So I'm going to launch Xcode, click Create a new Xcode project, choose iOS, Single View App, and click Next. The product name is going to be called Hello World. We also need to set an organizational name, which would either be our company's name or our personal name, and an organizational identifier, which is typically a reverse domain name. So we have the domain techinnovator.online. We reverse that and it becomes online.techinnovator. The organization identifier along with the product name become the bundle identifier. So online tech innovator hello-world uniquely identifies this application in the universe of apps. And notice that the space in Hello World became a dash in Hello World in the bundle identifier. We can also choose the language we want to develop in. In this course, we're going to develop in Swift, so we're always going to choose Swift. And we have the option of including some optional information in our project. If we say use core data, some code is added to enable core data use. We can also include unit tests and UI tests, but for this example, we're not going to include core data or the tests. So I'm going to click Next. I want to organize my projects. I've chosen to create an iOS project folder inside of a projects folder, inside of my documents folder. This is where I'm going to put all of my iOS projects. I have the ability to create a Git repository on the Mac in that project folder by clicking this box. But in this example, we're going to be doing all of our Git at the command line. So do not check here the Create Git repository on my Mac. We'll click Create, and we now have our project. If I were to open up a terminal and go to Documents, Projects, iOS, we see that we have a Hello World, and I'm going to cd to Hello World, and inside of it is the Xcode project and another Hello World folder that contains all of the files and folders for my project. At the current time, we are not managing this project, this folder, using Git. Our first step with Git is going to be to go to GitHub and create a new repository. So I'm going to click on the New Repository button, and my repository is going to be called Hello World. When I hit Tab, you see it pops up a message that says it will be created as Hello-World because they don't allow spaces in the repository name, but that's not going to cause any problems for us. The description is Solution to Hello World Challenge.
And you should initialize this with a README and a git ignore set to Swift.
We're not going to put a license in this. You could choose a license if you want to. And we are making this a public repository. When it's made public, that means everybody can see it. If you make it private, only you can see it.
And it is a good lesson to always press enter after you type in the search box for the git ignore, because if you don't and you click out of it, it doesn't actually set Swift to Swift.
So we're going to go down again and choose Swift and hit enter. And now our git ignore is Swift. So we do have a README. We do have a git ignore based on Swift, public repository called Hello World. Creating the repository. Once the repository is created, we have our git ignore, a README file, and if I click on clone or download, we have the URL for our clone with HTTPS web URL. And we're going to need that when we interact with GitHub on the command line. For now, I'm just going to copy this to the clipboard so that I have it. I am now going to go back to the command line.
But even before you do that, aren't we forgetting to add something in the git ignore?
I did forget something. So the git ignore that GitHub provided us for use with Swift is actually missing one entry that we like to have in our git ignore, and that is we want to ignore which file?
The .ds store.
And so we're going to click the edit button and then go down to the other section of the .gitignore, and we're going to say .ds_store. .ds store files are created on Mac OS to remember information about files in a directory. So for example, if you move the icon of a file to a different geographic location, then the .ds store file would include information about that. We don't want to track .ds store files in directories because every developer on their own system could be manipulating that .ds store, and that isn't important to the project and actually can create conflicts. So we want to ignore that. Once we've made the change to the file, we got to commit the changes. This is like saving the changes. And we're going to commit the changes to the master branch, the only branch that we have, the branch that is created when the project is created on GitHub. So we're going to need a message to go along with it. I'm going to say added.ds_store. We could add an additional description if we want to. And what are the rules for these commit messages?
Commit messages should be starting with a capital letter, have no punctuation marks at the end, and should be a very short description and very descriptive. So it should be no longer than 72 characters, and it should exactly explain what you're doing in that entire commit. If you need more space to actually explain something, you can use this optional extended description down here below the top.
So we are going to commit this change to the master branch. When the change is committed, we're going to see that this file is taken out of edit mode. If I go back to the branch, we see our list of files, the README and the .gitignore. So now I believe I'm ready. This is like a base repository for us to start with. So now if I go back to the command line, I'm going to make this window just a little bigger. I need to make a local Git repository. And how do I do that?
You do it using the command git init.
So where do I want to do that? Right now I am inside of, let me go back. I just want to make sure we're in the right place, right? So there is my iOS project folder.
Right, and we have our Hello World project folder, and we want to go in the topmost project folder created for this project. And that would be that first Hello World directory. Notice we have another Hello World directory inside of that, which contains all of our Swift files, but we want to do it on the topmost.
So we're in the right place right now. There is currently no .git file in this directory, so I'm going to run git init. The moment I do that, a .git directory is created. Let me do an AL. And this .git directory contains all of the tracking information that Git uses. So now this is under Git management.
Exactly. So now we actually need to add all of our files and actually commit them to our local repository.
So I'm going to say to git add dot, which says add all of our files. And then I want to make a commit with a message, so -m, and we're going to call this our first commit. So now that we have done that, we only have committed that and remembered the changes locally.
Exactly. So now we need to attach a origin, an alias, to our remote.
Well, let's talk about that, what that means. So we have our GitHub account here, and we have this repository on this remote server, and we have this HTTPS URL that is used to clone this repository. What we need to do is have some way of specifying that we want to do things with this remote repository, and we do that by creating an alias that is an alias for the remote that we can use in place of that URL. So let me do it, and then we'll talk about why we chose to name things the way we did. So we're going to say git remote. So we're creating a piece of information that says what the URL is for the remote, and we're going to add this. And then we need to come up with a name or an alias for this remote location, for this clone with HTTPS URL. And we're going to call it origin. And that is done kind of by tradition that we call the remote alias for this HTTPS URL origin. Now we need to specify the URL. So I'm just to make sure I've copied it correctly, I'm going to copy it again there and paste it here. So now the word origin means this particular GitHub URL.
And now we need to merge our Git histories from our local repository and our remote repository, and also merge the files.
So right now we have this Hello World directory in the Xcode project, and up here we have a .gitignore and a README. So we want to pull the things we have from the remote down to my local directory GitHub or Git instance, right?
Exactly. So let's do that. So the next command we're going to run is git pull --rebase origin master. So what this is saying is let's pull down all the files from our remote repository, and with those files let's merge our histories together using rebase, and we're pulling down from our origin, or that HTTPS URL that we copied earlier, on the master branch.
And after we do that, if I do ls-al, we see that we now have the Hello World project, and we also have the Hello World directory that presumably has our Swift files in it. I also notice that Xcode saw something happened.
And so some sort of metadata that Xcode was tracking noticed a change in the files, and this pops up. This will typically pop up sometimes when you pull information down from GitHub repositories or master repositories of your own stuff. Typically what you do is simply keep Xcode version, and it will go away and it will be happy.
So we now have our histories for the remote and local matched up, and all of the files are together here. Now the remote repository doesn't have all of our files yet.
Exactly, but we might not want to just push yet. We might actually be tracking, and we might have already committed a file that should be ignored, which would have been included in our gitignore, but our gitignore did not exist when we made our first commit on our local repository.
So we essentially want to make Git forget all of the files it was tracking, and then we want it to start tracking all the files again, ignoring the ones that are in the gitignore.
Exactly.
So the first part, making it forget everything that it had been tracking, is done with git rm -r --cached dot. Now that is a scary looking command because rm typically means remove, and it is removing some information. It's removing what's being tracked, but we want to assure you that the files are all still there.
Yeah, it is just simply telling you that those files are no longer tracked with Git, but the history still is within Git, so you're fine on that way.
So now we need to add back in the files that we want to have track, and so we're going to say git add, and dot means add them all, but the adding dot really means add them all except for what gitignore tells us to ignore. So by saying forget everything and then saying git add dot, now that we have the gitignore pulled down from the remote, we can now only track the files that we should be tracking. So after that, these changes that we've made need to be committed. And keep in mind that a commit's like a checkpoint. It's a place you can go back to, and we want to say this work that we've done, we need to commit this work. You also must commit before you push, right?
Exactly.
So we're going to say git commit, and then we need a message to go with it, and we basically applied git ignore. Git ignore. Yep. Now the commit only says to the local repository, hey, remember this.
Exactly.
Now we need to push these changes to the master on GitHub. And
before we do that, let's look at that message that was provided when we made the last commit. First, the message was saying your name and email were configured automatically. Basically means that there are local configuration files on Git on your machine that have not yet been set up yet. So it tells you the commands to run for you to fix that and enter your username and your email used with GitHub, but that is not a problem. The next message, it says 2 files changed, 14 deletions, means that in our Xcode project we actually had files that were included in the git ignore. So those 2 files have now been deleted and removed and will no longer be tracked by Git.
So now that we've got the right set of things being tracked, we need to synchronize, our local with the remote location. And remember, we created an alias called origin to identify that remote location. So we're going to say git push -u, and then we're going to have origin master. And the -u, what does that mean?
The -u means set upstream. So what that is doing is saying that the current branch we are on should be set to the origin's master branch. So what we're saying is our master is the exact same as the master branch on origin.
So I'm going to hit enter. And it is now meaning that if I go up here and I refresh, what is on my local repository and what is on GitHub, except for the things meant to be ignored, match, correct?
Exactly.
So we are now at a place where we have a master branch with kind of the base project in it. I now want to do some development work, the development work for this particular challenge. And before I can do that, I want to do my work on a feature branch. So I need to create a feature branch, check it out, work on it, and then merge it back into the master branch when I'm done. So before I begin doing my development work, again, I'm going to create a branch for the feature I'm going to create. So I'm going to say git branch, and then I'm going to specify the branch I want to create, and we say feature slash, and the particular feature that we're creating is essentially what this app is about, which is Hello World. Now that created the branch. How can I see that branch was created?
You could type in git branch.
So we have a master branch and a feature Hello World branch, but the master branch is the current one, and I can tell that because of the star and it's in green. What I need to do is switch to the feature Hello World branch, and so I need to do a checkout, right?
Exactly. So switching is essentially called checkout in Git. You are checking out that feature branch.
And now if I say git checkout, what am I saying git checkout? I'm saying git branch. I can see that I have in fact checked out the feature Hello World branch. Now does Xcode know that?
Xcode does know that. So up here next to the project navigator, there is a source control navigator. If we click source control navigator, we'll see our branching. We have a feature folder. So if we go back to the terminal, we'll notice that we called our new branch feature / hello world. Xcode takes that feature and makes that a folder within Xcode. So now we have this feature folder under branches. We have a hello world branch within it. And notice what's next to it. What's next to it, Dale?
It says current. So we know that's like the star over on the command line. That's the current branch.
Exactly.
So we are in the correct branch to be doing our development work to develop the Hello World feature. So I'm going to go back to this first folder, which shows me my Hello World project contents. And this is where I'm going to begin doing my development work. While we're here, let's do a little review of how Xcode works. So the Xcode IDE is made up of multiple panels. This left side can have what's in it changed by going through these icons, but the whole left side can be made to disappear by clicking this icon. And the reason for knowing about these icons are A, you could walk up to a computer and find that one of these panels is missing and you get a little worried that don't know how to get it back, or you could make one of them disappear and you don't know how to get it back, been there before. or you need room. And especially if you're working on a laptop, you need really a lot more space than most laptop displays give you. So we might make these various panels appear and disappear so we have space to work.
Exactly. Xcode is a very space-intensive application. It needs a lot of space for it to actually you get all the abilities. So keep that in mind if you're ever running out of room and you need more space to see or do something.
So anytime you see a box with a bar in it, it basically means make that particular thing appear and disappear. So the project files are here, and one of them is called main storyboard. And if we click on it, we get this. This thing right here is our view controller. We're going to learn a lot more about view controllers later, but this is the controller for our view. This is what the user sees. This arrow that appears right here is the entry point. This tells Xcode that this view controller is going to be where this application starts. If I were to delete that arrow, then Xcode wouldn't know where to start. If I want to put that arrow back, I select the view controller, I go to
the Attributes
Inspector, and then I click Is Initial View Controller, and then that arrow appears. It is in here that we have a view, and the view will then contain the pieces of our user interface. We also have a thing called a safe area, and that defines parts of the user interface where other stuff may go. Essentially, we're going to stay inside the regions, to the left of, to the right of, above and below the safe areas. And we'll be seeing that as we do our layout. So I am going to build the UI of interest, and the user interface we are to create is to contain a label and 2 buttons. And the label is to be 20 points down from the top safe area and centered horizontally. And it's initially to contain the word welcome ! So I'm going to select my view controller. I'm going to make sure that my right panel is open. At the bottom there are 4 icons. The third one over from the left is the object library. Make sure it is selected, and in it we're going to search for label. I'm going to drag the label out, and as I move it around you can see this dotted blue line appears. That means that I have at the present positioned it so it's horizontally in the middle. I'm going to just drop my label there. Now this label doesn't actually exist in the position that I put it. It's just there for me to add things called auto layout constraints. In fact, if I say view this on a small phone, you'll see that label is no longer centered. So if I want the label to be centered and to be a certain distance down from the top, then I'm going to need to set constraints. So I'm going to select the label, hold the Control key down, and click drag diagonally. And I want to stay inside the view controller. When I leave up, I have options I can choose, and I want to choose 2 of them. I want to say center horizontally in safe area, and I also want to say top space to safe area. To make 2 selections, what do I need to do?
So you need to hold the Shift key.
So I hold the Shift key, choose the first one. I can keep on holding the Shift key if I want to, but I'm going to actually leave up off the Shift key, and then I can choose the second one. If I only make one choice, that choice will be made, it'll be added, and the dialog will disappear. If I make multiple choices using the Shift key, then I must click Add Constraints for those constraints to be added. The blue line here, this long one, indicates that I'm centered horizontally, and this little blue line at the top indicates the amount of space I'm down from the top safe area. And the top safe area is reserved for status bar, for navigation bars, and for any items that Apple might decide should go, above the content in the safe area.
So looking at our requirements again, it says place the UI label 20 points down from the top safe area. Dale, how can we tell if it's 20 points down?
So I clicked on that line right there, and over here it popped up that a constant of 23. I could also double click, and I find this hard to do sometimes, and I'm having to, sometimes it zooms in like it did there, and if it zooms in, you got to kind of zoom back out again. So if let me try this again. There we go. Find that hard sometimes, other times easy, but that is the same number 23. I could change that to 20 right here. Again, I could select this, go to the ruler, or select the line, and it will pop up this kind of same information. And I can change the number that's in there. So if I wanted 15, I could do that. If I wanted 20, I could do that.
And notice while you're actually changing those numbers, the UI label is actually moving itself right now. Because it is fully constrained, it knows that if you change one of the constraints, it will automatically move the UI label for you.
And if I drag this off to the side, all my great blue lines turn to orange lines because it's saying to me, well, through that dotted box right there, that's where my label actually is, but I've kind of moved it out of the way to work on something, and it's saying, you know, you're deviated from where you should be. If you want it to go back again, you could select the label and then go down to this icon, which is update frames, and it'll put them where they should be. And we'll look at that a little bit later when we have the whole UI in place and when we have multiple items, how we handle that. So that's my label. And the label is initially to have the words, according to the requirements, welcome, exclamation point in it. So what I did is I double clicked on the label and I can type welcome, exclamation point.
Is that the only way to change the UI label?
No, I could also select the label and go over here to the attributes inspector, and we'll see the same words appear there. I'm going to just type hello for a second so I can change it right there. I can also change what's in the labeling code, and we're going to do that as well, but for right now I'm going to just leave welcome, exclamation point right there. So that's my label. The next thing I need is a button that's going to say hello 10 points below the label and centered horizontally. So I go to my library, I search for button, I drag the button out and below welcome, I put it so the dotted blue line is there because I in fact do want to center it horizontally ultimately, but just dragging and dropping it there doesn't mean it is there. And then I need to set it so that it is 10 points below the label and centered horizontally. So you select the button, hold the control key down, and click drag while the control key is down from the button to the label and leave up.
So instead of actually dragging to the view controller, you're dragging to the label, which is what we want to constrain to.
And I want a certain amount of vertical spacing, and I want to center horizontally. That's two things I want to set. So I hold the shift key down. Choose the first one. I can unchoose things. So I'm choosing vertical spacing, center horizontally. So you add, remove all the choices you want to make, and then you say add constraints. So now the button is a certain distance down and centered horizontally. The amount down appears if I click on that line. And the amount that I'm down right now is 20. Notice it says that the welcome bottom has a relationship to the button top, and the amount of difference between them is this constant 20. I actually want this to be 10. And I want my button to say
hello.
Hello. I could also select the button and change it over here. Then I finally have another button called clear. So I drag the button below the first button. And I'm actually going to do something interesting. I'm going to drag it off to the side a bit. It's not going to be centered horizontally. Just, you know, it's like drag the button out and dropped it. I'm going to control click drag from this button to that button. I'm going to hold the Shift key, say vertical spacing and center horizontally, add constraints, and we'll see that the constraints have been added, and we have our little orange box which indicates
where the actual UI button will be when we see it in the application.
So if I go down to update frames and click that, it snaps into position.
Perfect.
Now I have a little bit too much distance between hello and this new button, so I'm going to double click on that blue line or select it and go to the ruler, all the options that we showed you for setting that value, and this is also 10 down. And this second button is going to be labeled with clear.
So Dale, let's say I moved everything around. So all of it is moved. Somehow constraints have just gone wild, and I want everything to go back to where it's supposed to actually belong. So we could do what we did before and select each individual UI element and click the update frames. What's a couple other ways to do it?
So another way is you can grab the ones, select the ones that you want. You can either click drag across it, or you could select the first one, hold the Shift key down and select the second, select the third. Whatever you have selected, you can then update. And then finally, I could kind of drag these around and select the view controller. So we're selecting the whole thing, and then we could say update. Keeping in mind that when we just drag those controls around, we're not changing their layout constraints. And Apple gives us that ability because you need to basically put things in place before you can add constraints to them. And if they lived where they believed they should live, they might be all on top of each other up in a corner or something. So the ability to move things around is different than the ability to set constraints. And as long as we don't have a yellow exclamation point and orange lines, we're really good here. So we have a label and two buttons. Our goal is that when we run the app, it runs, it displays welcome in the label. When we click hello, this changes to hello world. When we click clear, it clears it. Which means we need a way to interact with this label object so that we can change what's the text in that label. And we need a way to have a function execute when the user taps on the button. So let's start with how we reference an object and interface builder from our code.
That would be an IB outlet.
That would be an IB outlet. And the IB outlet needs to live in a code file somewhere. So here's how this works. This thing represented by this icon is our view controller in a visual form. We also have a file over in our project that says view controller, which is a class file. A class defines a type in Swift as an object type, and this class view controller is a subclass of UI view controller. And by being a subclass, it means it does everything a UI view controller can do, and then it can additionally do these other things that we put in this class file. So this view controller file right now, if we go back to view controller and then click here on the icon that is the identity inspector, we see the custom class is that view controller right now. So this view controller is using this view controller code file to represent this object. And the IB outlet we're going to create is going to be in a view controller file. But I don't like the fact that Apple gave us this very generic, horribly named view controller, because it doesn't really tell us what we're doing, and in most apps we're going to have many view controllers. So I want to name it something different. I could in fact change the name of the file and then change the name of the class. So I could here say, let's name it something else. Or what I typically do, hold the control key down, click on that file and say delete. And we're going to move it to the trash. That view controller code file is gone now. And if I go back to the storyboard and select the view controller, you still see it thinks that view controller is its custom class. I'm going to actually delete that entry and hit enter. And we're going to see right now this thing is the more generic UI view controller. So we need to create a custom class that is a subclass of UI view controller for this view controller that's appropriately named. So here's how I'm going to do that. I'm going to click on the Hello World folder inside the Hello World project. I'm going to hold the control key down and click, and then I'm going to say new file.
You could also right click if you have that ability.
And by the way, right click is something that you have to set up on your Mac. So let's show that. If you go to your mouse, that would be this secondary click feature. And I'm clicking on the right side of my mouse. If you're using a trackpad, you would set it in the trackpad. By default, the right click feature is not on most Macs. So control click will always work, right click will work if it's enabled. So I'm going to right click or control click on this Hello World folder. And then I'm going to say new file. And I'm going to say Cocoa Touch class under iOS, and this is really, really important. If you're on Mac OS, it won't work. If you're on tvOS and watchOS, it won't work. You got to be in iOS if we're doing iOS development. iOS Cocoa Touch class. Next. Let's assume there's nothing in subclass of. If you start typing UI view controller, it will fill that in. You can also possibly choose it from the drop down. So we're going to have a subclass of UI view controller, and let's call this Hello World view controller. So that's more aptly named for what it is that we're doing here. I don't want to create an XIB file. The language is Swift. I click next, and I'm going to create this Hello World view controller inside my project. Now if I go back to the main storyboard and select my view controller and go to custom class, which is listed in the identity inspector, I can start typing H and it fills the rest in. How does it know that that's the file I want?
Because of the class type of view controller is a subclass of UI view controller. Interface Builder is super smart, recognizing that you are in a view controller. Hello World view controller is of the correct type, and it's the only one that starts with an H. It automatically knows Hello World view controller.
So we now have that custom class, right? So this is where we can put our code. What we have though is we have this thing in Interface Builder, and then we have this separate code file, and we need to write some code here that knows how to connect itself with this thing in Interface Builder. And this is how this works. So in the storyboard, I'm going to make my window a little wider here. I'm going to select the Hello World view controller. Notice the icon, when I click the icon, it's changed to the actual kind of name of the class file with spaces between the words, which is really cool. And it knows that because of camel casing. And while we're here, we should mention class files begin with an uppercase letter. Always. Expect us to yell at you if you don't. Variable names and function names begin with lowercase letters, and everything is camel cased. So the parts of the name begin with uppercase letters, but variables and functions start with a lowercase letter. Classes and new types begin with uppercase letters. So I have my view controller here selected. I'm now going to select this icon called the Assistant Editor. And I'm actually going to close that left side so I have more room to work. And if you're wondering, I'm using the trackpad to move this into position here. Or if you have a magic mouse, you can use your finger on the top of it to move this around. Or you can go down here to the scroll bar and move this around side to side, at least here. So we want our, what is this? View controller?
Yep.
In Interface Builder next to the code for the view controller. Now, if this view controller has a custom class, and this is set to automatic, when you select it, it will automatically put the associated class next to it. If it's in manual, it could be set to something else. Like here's the app delegate. This won't work for us. So if you go up here and it says manual, that's okay as long as the right file is displayed here. I mean, I manually could go to Hello World View Controller. But if I want to select the view controller and automatically have it display the right code file, I can go to automatic and it will display Hello World View Controller. Now I need to create that IB outlet. So we're going to do it and then we'll explain it. Select the label. Control click drag from inside the label to inside the class. And we're doing it just inside the class, outside any of the functions in the class. Leave up. It's going to say we want to create an outlet connection and that we're doing it to a UI label. And it's important in your head that you look and you see that the type of object that you thought you click drag from is the one listed here. Because it's really easy to accidentally select a constraint object or if it's a busy interface, another part of the UI, and you'd end up trying to create an outlet on the wrong thing. So we want to create it on the UI label. We're going to give it a name and we're going to call it the message label. So now I have a thing called an IB outlet, which is a variable called message label to the type UI label. And what matters right now, because more information about what weak means and why the exclamation point and all of this is going to come later, what matters right now is if we do this, message label is a way that we can interact with the label object. So now we need to have something happen when either of these buttons is tapped.
So before we even go further, Dale, I have a question, and we could do this when we're about to show what we're about to show next. What happens if I forgot to set Hello World in the view controller in Interface Builder?
That's a really good question. So let me do this. Before I answer that, let me show you one other thing, because what I want to do is act like I'm doing this again, right? So I'm going to delete this IB outlet. Now, you might think I just deleted the connection. I didn't. I deleted a line of code. If I come back here to the label and control click on it, we'll see that message label still has a connection with the Hello World view controller as an outlet. That we called that thing message label. To get rid of this, I have to click the X.
So you might do that if you've misspelled an IB outlet name, correct?
Yeah, or I accidentally created an IB outlet to the wrong thing. But just deleting the line of code doesn't get rid of the outlet. What will happen is the app will crash if I keep it in Interface Builder but get rid of the line of code. So I'm kind of now back to where I began. Now, to answer your question, right now, Hello World View Controller has this custom class Hello World View Controller. Let's say I forgot to set that. Well, first off, Automatic now has no idea what code file belongs with this view controller because there is no setting here as to what code file belongs with this view controller. Now let's say, oh yeah, but I know I can do this manual thing. So I go up to Manual Hello World to Hello World View Controller. So this looks like we're in the right place, right? But again, this view controller does not have this set as its custom class. So there is no relationship between these two right now. So I'm going to select the label, control click drag, and I'm missing the insertion point. It's saying, I don't know why you want to insert in there because this view controller is not associated with this code file. The moment I go up here to the custom class, so I need to make sure I've clicked the view controller, and I say, what did I call it?
Hello World.
And the reason I can't see that is I need to open that left again. It's Hello World View Controller. I'm going to come back here and say Hello World View Controller. The moment I do that, when I select this label and control click drag, I get an insertion point. And again, outlet to a UI label, and we're going to call it message label. So now I want to create a IB action from this button. So again, I select the button, control click drag from it into the code. Now I want to stay inside the class. I can't go outside the class. It won't let me insert out there. I don't want to go inside any of my existing functions really. I typically put any new functions I create below the other functions I have but inside the class. So I leave up and it's saying connection outlet. I don't want to create an outlet. I want to create an action. So I select action and it's going to be on the event touch up inside, which means the user's tapped on it and taken their finger off of it while they were over the button. I want to create an action that is a function that's going to get executed when that tap occurs. And I'm going to say hello tapped. So that creates a function called hello tapped inside of the curly braces of which code will execute when the tapping of the button occurs. Then I'm going to the clear button, and I'm going to click drag into my view controller below my other IB action. I'm not going to create an outlet, I'm going to create an action, and this one is going to be called clear tapped. Connect. So I now have my outlet to the message label, and I have my two functions that get executed when either of the buttons get tapped. Now we previously mentioned that maybe we don't have welcome exclamation point up here. Maybe it just says label. There's another place where we could specify welcome exclamation point, and that is here in view_did_load. When does view_did_load get called?
Right when the name says it. Right when the UI view of the view controller is loaded.
And at the point view_did_load gets called, the user interface UI elements created in interface builder exist. So we can interact with them here. So this is going to happen so fast and before the user sees anything really that they'll never see the word label. If we put code here to specify what's going to be in label, that's what they're going to see. So I'm going to say message label.text equals welcome. So when the app runs, the view controller and instance is created. This is the first view controller because of this arrow right here. View_did_load is going to get called, message label is going to exist, and we're going to tell the text of the message label to contain welcome exclamation point. So then when hello tapped gets called, we want to be able to say message label.text equals hello world. And what did I specifically say? I want when the hello button is tapped, hello world exclamation point is to be displayed. And then when clear is tapped, we're going to say message label.text is going to be equal to quote quote. We're going to give it the empty string, and that will display nothing.
So Dale accidentally mistyped something and pointed out a very valuable lesson. So this is a compile time error. Value of type UI label has no member of capital text. And so what that is actually saying is that message label does not have that property on it. So what we actually need to do is we need to fix that. So we need to make text lowercase.
And I could just go here and type T, and that would fix it.
And everything is happy.
Now I want to show something else. If I put message label and I type dot, it's going to use autocomplete to show me all of the things it can do. If I type a lowercase t, it will show me text in the list. I can keep on typing text, or I can just select it.
Or press tab.
Or press tab. So let's do that as well. So I go dot, go to T, and then I press tab. And then I set that equal to quote quote. I use that a lot to help me keep from making mistakes. Also, notice the colors. This message label is kind of a greenish blue, and the text is kind of a blue purple. When it was capital text, it was black. So you have all kinds of visual indicators as to whether you're getting the code entered correctly or not. So I believe I've built my app and it is meeting the requirements, and now I want to test it. But before I even test it, I haven't really done anything with Git in a while.
No, so we've actually done a lot of work right now. Right now would be an excellent opportunity to actually commit what we've done so far.
Okay, so we're going back to the command line, and we are currently in a particular branch. We're in the feature hello world branch, which is good. This is where we're supposed to be doing our coding, in a feature branch. And we need to do what with that? We need to commit it and push it, right?
Exactly.
But before we commit it, we got to tell it what stuff to include, and we do that with the git add dot.
So before I even do that, let's see what git status says. So git status says we've modified, we've added, we've deleted, and we've modified files across the board, and some stuff is in red. So like Dale said, we need to tell Git that we want to track everything. And once I do that, and I type git status again, everything is green, meaning it is all being tracked by Git, all of those changes that we've made since our last commit.
So we now know what things are going to be included in the commit. So now we need to perform the commit. So we're going to say git commit with a message. So we're going to say -m, and the message is going to be first implementation of requirements. Does that work for you?
Perfect.
So that was my commit. That doesn't mean now, though, that it's on GitHub. To get it on GitHub, we need to do a push. So we're going to say git push -u origin, which was our alias that had the URL for the remote repository. And then we're in the feature branch that we called what?
Hello world.
And then we should now have up on GitHub the same code that we have in Xcode. In fact, you know, if our computer died right now, I'd be A-OK, because I'd get another computer, get Xcode back on it, pull everything from GitHub, or clone it actually, and then keep going, right?
Exactly.
So I want to now test my application. How do I do that?
So now we want to press this run button up in the top left-hand corner that looks like a triangle. Once you press that, that will compile and launch the simulator and run our application on the simulator.
And it's going to run it on an iPhone 7 Plus. Let's drag that over just a little bit so we see right there next to it, Hello World's going to run on an iPhone 7 Plus.
And the first time that you've run the simulator on Xcode, it may take a while to load. This is completely normal. It is loading a lot more things than just your application. Ours kind of loaded pretty fast, but now we have our app. And notice what our label says. Instead of saying label, like it does in Interface Builder, Dale, what does it say?
It says welcome exclamation point, and that's because here in view did load, we told it to display welcome exclamation point.
Perfect.
Now, there's some other things we ought to test. What happens if I rotate the phone?
Well, we haven't even tested our buttons yet.
Oh, we haven't. That's right. So let's give that a try.
So let's click on hello. And notice welcome has now changed to hello world, exactly like it should in hello tapped. Now if I click clear, notice what happens to this label. It is now gone. So you'll also notice these buttons are actually moving up a little bit depending on the buttons pressed. This is completely fine. It is basically saying that when that label has no content in it, it has no height. And since we are 10 points from that label, and if that label has no points, we are now 30 points from the top.
So let's click on hello again. So we have hello world there, and let's rotate the phone.
So the way you can rotate is going up to hardware, rotate left or right. Once you do that, notice where the UI labels and the UI buttons are. They are centered horizontally in the view, just like we've tried. And I'm going to rotate right one more time.
So now we're upside down, and in Xcode in the simulator, it doesn't detect the rotation when it's upside down.
So if I rotate one more time, notice it fixes itself. Let's go all the way around, and it's all happy again.
Also, at the bottom of the simulator, there's a home button, and you can click it just like on a normal phone, and then I can go back into Hello World again by selecting the icon. So now it looks like my application is working okay. What do I have to do before I can say that I'm done?
So we have committed, we have pushed, but we are still on our feature branch. We need to push merge everything from our feature branch into our master branch and then push that to our remote repository.
Okay, so if I go to the command line and I say that I want to do, git branch, just to see where I am, right? I am currently in the feature hello world branch. My product, the thing that I'm going to get graded on, the thing I'm going to get evaluated on if I'm selling a product, is what's in master. So we need to merge what's in this feature hello world branch in master. And the way to do this is to first go check out master. So we're going to make master the active branch. Then we're going to perform the merge. We're going to say git merge feature hello world. And then we're going to push this to the master branch on GitHub. So I'm going to say git push -u origin master. And remember, origin is an alias for the HTTPS URL that represents the remote repository, and we're saying that we want to push this on the master branch. And if we go here and we say, oh, here's our Hello World project, so we're going to repositories, here's Hello World. This should currently be up to date with what is happening here on my local machine. And one way to look at this is, let's go to Hello World View Controller, and there indeed is the code that we just wrote.
Okay, so now we have completely finished our project, correct?
Yep.
So what URL do I use to turn in?
So we want to go to the repository and go to the green cloner download button and copy this clone with HTTPS URL. This is the URL that needs to be submitted so that we can get to your work.